most parents and families discover their children have it the hard way because I guess like us, we're naive to the differences in diabetes out there. Thought diabetes was diabetes, like what most of us commonly know it as.
What Chris and Amanda Young didn't know was that there was a much serious form of diabetes called type 1. Type 1 diabetes is an incurable autoimmune disease that attacks the beta cells of the pancreas.
The pancreas is what regulates the glucose in our body and helps us to absorb when we eat food that has carbohydrates, it converts into glucose, and then we use that glucose to fuel everything that works within our body, all the other organs, gives us energy. And with type 1, when the body attacks the pancreas, it destroys the islet cells that produce insulin. And insulin is what allows us to absorb the glucose that we take from our food.
It all started when their daughter Evie was 6 years old. They noticed an increase in her appetite. They assumed that it was just growth spurts.
The increase in appetite is due to the fact that the body is no longer absorbing the carbohydrates, the glucose that's transformed from carbohydrates for energy.
And because her body was not absorbing the glucose and nutrients due to her type 1 diabetes, Evie's pancreas was no longer creating insulin, which had her body getting the needed nutrients from her fat supply, thus making her appear leaner.
It was all just looking like, the natural way of life of her developing more and getting bigger, and or at least thinking that she was getting taller, but really it was just her body trying to protect itself. And little did we know that she was dying slowly.
It was when Evie became easily fatigued that they noticed something was wrong.
She was starting to say she was getting a shortness of breath, and that her chest was hurting a little bit. And so at that point, with her having all these concerns and no fever, I knew something was up. Because if the body's not triggering the fever, its natural response to trigger its immune system to fight off anything that it's going through, there's something wrong.
Chris and Amanda brought their little girl to the clinic. That is when she started vomiting. They, along with the doctor, wrote it off as a possible case of the stomach flu. Although the doctor told them to just monitor Evie and keep her hydrated, they sensed something wasn't right when she wasn't able to eat.
And I told her, I said, Evie, if you don't drink this, I got to take you in, they're going to stick a needle in your arm and feed you through the needle. And she looked up at me and said, Dad, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, we knew something was up.
When a 6-year-old says, yeah, stick the needle in me, I'll eat through that, don't. And I picked her up and we ran to the car and got her to back to the clinic.
Through blood work, they noticed her glucose levels were extremely high. A normal rating would be between 80 and 120, and Evie's was above 600, a fatally toxic level. The doctor noted that she needed to be transported to GMH Pediatric ICU right away.
I have to commend everyone there for being very calm for now that I realize how serious it was. Because it wasn't registering to me. They were saying the word diabetes, and I'm like, my kid's super healthy. Why would she have diabetes? It doesn't make any sense. That's because I was very naive to type 1. I didn't even know there was a difference in diabetes until my daughter was diagnosed with it.
What initially was a visit to the clinic turned into rushing Evie to GMH, realizing that she was going into a coma as a result of her diabetes.
I remember that ride in the ambulance, just still being in shock and denial and trying to understand everything, and just wondering if those were going to be our last moments with her, and how easily that the DKA could have been prevented.
Both admit they felt guilty for not knowing what seems so obvious now.
After researching more about type 1 diabetes, I've come to discover that most parents and families discover their children have it the hard way because I guess like us, we're naive to the differences in diabetes out there.
The couple continues to share their story with the community and via social media in hopes that it helps other parents and families. Amanda is in the process of forming a nonprofit organization that will not only offer information and awareness for type 1 diabetes, but also help with the emotional well-being of those living with this incurable disease, especially children.
I want to share our story because it could potentially save another child's life. maybe not take away the aspect of them being diagnosed with type 1, but at least prevent that heartache of finding out the hard way.
Stay tuned for part 2 when we hear more from Chris and Amanda and from Evie herself about her fears and hopes for a cure. With this week's Health Check Report, I'm Jonah Goncharfris.
Health Check is presented by
Island Cancer Center.